Hello and welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Son of a Witch. Once in a while, Liir caught sight of the chatty fellow who had befriended him in the archway, but that soldier was assigned to a different division. In any case, Liir was determined to maintain a comfortable anonymity, so he didn't go chasing for friends, neither in his own division nor beyond it. One morning in the yard, when Liir was hauling sacks of potatoes from a delivery cart, he spotted Commander Cherrystone arriving in Broam. The man appeared weary. Liir hugged back and kept silent, but he invented reasons to linger longer in the area. He watched as the commander spoke with a sergeant-at-arms. The commander took up a coffee in a china cup and reviewed a construction site marked out for a new latrine or barracks or something. He then disappeared into a foreman's shed with a roll of schemes under his arm. An hour or so later, he emerged, a cigarette between his gloved fingers. Liir approached Commander Cherrystone and reintroduced himself. A new politeness and reserve hiding remained of his disapproval. Cherrystone might still be helpful. Yes, said the commander, distracted. Liir wasn't even sure Cherrystone remembered him, but the commander listened politely and said he would try to find out what he could about the details of carcass removal at South Stairs. You mustn't hold your breath, he said. I've a lot on my plate. There is much to be done for the defense of our city. There is, but we're not at war. I thought peace was at hand. Your high-born champion, Lady Glinda, thinks all is peaches and cream. She'd like it to be, but given the uncertainty of the political situation, the economy needs stimulus, and the threat of war is a great incentive to spend. Fiscal fraudage. Liir didn't know what this meant, but things did not seem to be happening. For weeks and then for months, he fed potatoes to the burly soldiers who dug and hauled the earth away from the building site, and eventually began the even harder work of setting colossal foundation stones in place. Liir was glad to be a slender thing, for he was better suited to kitchen work than transporting boulders. But slowly he deduced that, despite his nothing childhood in the Nowhere Mountains, he wasn't as quite as obtuse as he had imagined. He had no reason for smugness about it, to be sure. He was a bumpkin when it came to national affairs. He had little schooling and less practice at rhetoric. He didn't venture on opinions about current affairs, for he hardly knew what they were. No one bothered to circulate news broadside in the barracks, and the banter at mealtime boast about what whores and sores here. Yeah. When Liir recovered rather what was merely by hanging around the company of Elphaba, he had picked up something. Not power, not intuition, which he seemed to have down to her very eyelash. Not understanding, but something else. A good eat anyway. Would he find a way? Could he perform a spell? That was the ultimate competence with language, a skill Elphaba had in spades, that she used rarely and reluctantly. Was a spell, after all, but a way of coaxing syllables together so persuasively that some new word is spelled, some impression clarified, someone named, and some change managed. Despite his fight to the broom, Liir was sure he had no instinct for magic. It was the broom that managed his feet. He had gone for the ride, nothing more. If he ever felt the slightest tremor of intuition or capacity, he'd have pounced on it like a cat on a rat. No, he was duller than the other kitchen lads, even about basic things. He couldn't even predict whether he was going to need to use the latrine. But he found himself rounding syllables like stones in his mouth silently. He knew he was shy, and thought to be stupid. He was beginning to suspect, though, that he wasn't stupid, perhaps not even slow, merely uneducated. But not, he hoped, uneducatable. Commander Cherrystone didn't come seeking Liir out to answer his question about Nor. When several more weeks had passed, there was no starring commander again, and no message passed on by the aide-de-camp. Liir began to press the issue to others in the home guard. Cautiously, he started to circulate a scrap of gossip he had invented. A pair of horned hogs was slain in South Lairs because the hogs were magic. Their carcasses were removed before they could contaminate the other inmates with sorceric powers. Could it be the kitchen boys, hungry for tales of enchantment, took the stories as if it were gospel? Liir hoped that his inventions would trip a rebuttal, turning up some useful information about the actual disposition of the hogs, and by extension, suggesting the words next word about. But revelation was slow coming. The winter crashed in with the icy spite. His hands turned red and chilblained from water in which the potatoes dropped. At least he wasn't freezing or starving to death outside. Snow was falling in dozens. He bade his time. He was glad he got to feed the fellows who worked at the construction. Then they had finished shunting shoulders onto the site, but even in this cold, they were required to lift and set plumb and point. They got little relief from the cold. The home guard guessed they were building yet large barracks, as if numbers of the force might swell soon, or perhaps warehouses for the defense of artillery supposedly under development. During a thaw, a steep roof was framed and shingled. When the snows returned, the interior was roughed at a rapid rate. Before long, a unionist cleric, his ceremonial garments hidden beneath heavy fur robe, appeared in its stead. With smoking urns and hollow gestures, he sniggled the unnamed god, and the unfinished palace was consecrated as a basilica. The basilica was more or less functional by Liir mist. True, the paint and cold of Liir, the sprites said by some to have found it all, was out of favor. Few but illiterate country folk paid obedience to Liir anymore. But the celebration of that old holiday was still popular. Liirlism had been quietly absorbed into common culture, not least because the cash till splashed with money during the festive season. Liirlists made a welcome distraction from the anxiety about leadership that seemed to still grip Oz, even though the wizard was now gone half a year. Holiday presents came in all sizes for everyone but Liir. He had prepared a story about his parents' fierce devotion to unionism and their rejection of the heathen custom. But he didn't need to lie. No one asked about the absence of his gifts by his bunk. His mate received parcels in gilt paper, silly trinkets, useful cloths, small wallets of cash scented with clothes. He remembered the time Nora had given him the tale of her gingerbread mouse, and his mouth watered, but he swallowed it down. The basilica was large enough to hold 1,000 at a time, so everyone got to attend the strictly unionist service on Liir mist. Liir saw Commander Cherrystone in the front. A visiting chaplain with an ungainly flapping lip pulled himself from the pulpit and intoned in the beginning of a homily. The sung petition petered out into a tirade against loose morals of the day. Most of the soldiers were instantly deep, propping one another up on the benches, but Liir still had so little exposure to homiletics that he sat up straight and listened. The preacher, perhaps sensing someone midway down the room on the left was actually paying attention, began to improve. The minister gripped the edges of the lectern and swayed sideways. At every stage, even in the decorous and seemly home that the army provides you here, weird rumors of magical uprisings spring up, like weevils in the wheat, like maggots in the rump roast. Either his raised voice or the mention of magic stirred the morning crowd awake. And I'm going to stop it right there. Thanks for listening.